Hey, my name is Matt Storr and I repair saxophones for a living. And today I wanted to show you an example of original lacquer, what the engraving looks like on a Buescher Big B. Now there's a really good guide on original lacquer for Mark 6s on the Get a Sax site, which I'll link in the description. And a lot of that applies, pretty well to most every vintage saxophone. But for some reason, Big Bs, they're just a little bit different, a little bit harder to tell sometimes. And it's because usually original lacquer is actually going to be corroded around this engraving. And then it'll get lightly buffed and redone. And usually re-lacquers look better than original lacquer because it doesn't corrode as much. You can see here, this is starting to corrode in a couple spots. And what that is actually that's between the lacquer and the brass. It's not outside the lacquer, it's underneath it. And that'll just start happening all over, especially like this really, really fine work up here. And typically that's what an original lacquer one looks like. Of course, re-lacquers can look like that too, but you rarely see an original lacquer that actually looks like this. And it's rare enough that I feel like it might be handy to have an example. So they would engrave this and then lacquer over the top. And they didn't buff it. And so, like at the ends of lines in particular, like listen, it's really sharp. And there's like edges that stick up. Like if I took a cloth and tried to wipe this down, I'd be like leaving little spots of lint everywhere as it got caught like on the edges and burrs that are left over from this engraving. Especially on like the really fine parts like here. That stuff is usually sort of smeared in a re-lacquer. It's not nearly as sharp as this. You can see the edges of this engraving here. You can actually see the texture of it. You can see how sharp it is, hopefully. I've got this in 4K and this phone does a pretty good job. And you can see here also like in the letter engraving, that particular type of engraver called a liner. That stuff will get smeared out pretty easily by buffing. And a lot of times for some reason down here in the bow is often like really smeared compared to the rest. So you can see here what it actually looks like. See when it's not in the light anyways. Just see how sharp that is, and you can feel it. And even if you can't feel it, like if it's not in person, if you get like a really close-up photo of this stuff, I mean, you can really get like a macro photo like that or closer. These edges being sharp are a pretty dead giveaway, and that's largely true for most engraving on original lacquer horns, but particularly on Big Bs, just because you so rarely see them like this. I mean, this is just absolutely gorgeous. It has the original pads in it, and somehow it just has not really gotten corroded. You can see inside like the lettering. If I turn it up this way, it's a little better. Those like straight cuts there, that detail work, just incredible, really beautiful. But that's an example of original lacquer on a Big B. You rarely see it look this good. Typically, if it doesn't have corrosion, it's like a 90% chance it's a re-lacquer, but every once in a while you'll see one that actually looks like this and is original lacquer. And if you're trying to parse like whether you've got one or not, or whether the one you're thinking of buying is original or not, hopefully you find this video helpful, useful, and informative. Thanks for watching.